Jesus, it's packed.
Yeah, go down the back there, so. Welcome to the Shnug with Richie and Lavin. Hello, and welcome to the Shnug podcast. My name is Richard Loftus.
And I'm Lavin.
This is a podcast from the west coast of Ireland where we interview interesting people from all walks of life. Learn about their lives, their side hustles, their passions, their interests, and everything in between. How are you now?
Jeez, I'm grand now. How about yourself?
I'm grand, okay.
Yeah.
Are you fully recovered from the canoe now?
I was recovered like the day of the canoe. I was fine. I was fine. Like the canoe ended on the Sunday. I was fine on the Monday. It's grand.
Yeah. You're more athletic when it comes to that kind of crap than me now.
Maybe so. I'm just not going as hard as I used to.
Yeah. I don't know. After day 2, I was kind of like, yeah.
Well, that was the plan this year to only do 2 days.
Yeah.
But then, of course, I was playing music in Tully's on the Friday, so fat chance of that.
And you had the exhibition as well.
And the exhibition. Oh yeah, the exhibition.
Yeah, walking out of here at 5 a.m. Watch God, kind of. That was me done.
Yeah.
I was going to make the Sunday now.
Yeah. Oh, did you see any boats at all?
I seen a few down from Parkmore, but I didn't get in. So that's another box I'll have to tick next year.
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely. I didn't see the climbing race this year either. I was really looking forward to that, but just missed it.
That's just the weather, isn't it?
It's always about that.
Yeah, it's been a very tempestuous summer here, so.
Oh man, this is the wettest. Was it the wettest July on record? Is it?
It was. Yeah, it was.
Mad.
So they had to push everything from the Saturday onto the Sunday, really, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
It was a great for a first canoe. It was pretty good.
It was a good one. At least the boats this year sailed.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful to watch.
It was an eye-opening experience for me, really, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah.
What you got to see all you in your natural habitat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And put all those faces to names. To hear from stories,
Absolutely, yeah. They all come back in the canoe.
So that's it now. Really, the summer's kind of drawn to an end now. Really, there's nothing really.
I might get an Indian summer.
You might. Fingers crossed.
Hopefully.
Or even an African summer or anything.
That'd be nice.
Today we are joined by a man of many talents. To say he's prolific, I think, is putting it slightly, really. We are joined by Little John Nee. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me. Hi, Lavin. How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, it's good to be here.
I'm glad you found the place all right.
Yeah, I did. Like that, I was just straight off the motorway, so I was really lucky. It didn't, with no complications.
Good stuff. So when I say you're a man of many talents, you're a theatre performer, writer, director, probably producer, musician, poet, street performer. Is there any caps I'm missing for you there?
Well, yeah, there's a few. I was distracted in my own head when you were saying that because as you said it, I remembered a review I got a few years ago. Was it 2012 for the Spark Plug show?
Oh yeah.
And this guy who, I've never heard of him since. I don't think anybody else has heard of him since. But he says that I was a jack of all trades and master of none.
Ah, yes.
And I took it very personal, very badly. Kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, that's going to be on the internet forever. And then just today I was thinking, I wonder, could I find that if I tried to find it,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'd have a very punky attitude to things.
Yeah.
So it would be, it's only now that I'm starting to call myself a director. Because I've directed the shows, and I see the shows, I see an overall picture of the shows when I'm creating them, the theatre shows. So yeah, there's that direction aspect to it as well. And funny, we're doing an application for a show to tour, and as we're filling in the part where it's in what's your job kind of thing, and we put down musician, which of course I felt dodgy about for a long time. Calling myself a musician when I know so many brilliant musicians, and I'd be very much a punk tradition.
Okay, great.
So it would be, I wouldn't consider myself as a musician. I do now, but it took a long while. But anyway, I thought, but I composed all the music, the soundtrack to the show as well. And there's been a few shows that have done that at this stage. Well, a lot of shows that have composed the soundtrack. So I had musical composer as well, And that's the kind of dip, because like you feel like a pain in the hole, kind of. You're thinking, yeah, I done this, and then I designed the set as well. Did you not? Yes. And it's like, just fucking get over yourself and just I wrote it and performed in it, kind of. So sometimes I let it, but then at other times it's worth it to actually say all that you did do. You know. But in conversation, I wouldn't go into all the kind of bits that you do.
Like, if you don't give yourself credit, who else is going to?
Well, there's some situations where you really have to do that. But I think in this day and age, it's really difficult. The whole self-promotion aspect to it, particularly if you're living in the west of Ireland and you're not going to get theatre reviewers here. And if you're doing it, if you're self-motivated, self-producing, it's up to me to say, I do all this. But it gets it can be very wearing, I think, as well, because sometimes you don't believe it, and other times you're just sick of yourself. I'd rather be actually doing the work than that, which doesn't feel like doing all those things. It's more like, I had a real good time when the early days of the lockdown, because I was on my own and I was in the garage, and I got a commission from the Regional Cultural Centre in Letterkenny.
Lovely.
To say that they would, would I do live shows on my phone? And I thought, great, so we'd done one, and then I thought, I'll get my garage nice to look nice, set up a stage space, put some sparkly lights and that. And then as I get into it, because obviously lockdown, that magical first few weeks when there was no one around, there was no cars, there was nobody near you.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, okay, I've got bits of set out in the garage. So I'd spend all week creating the space, and it was just the most fun thing. It was more like a child playing, which just like, I'll make a den now kind of thing. I'll do if I do that poem, or I can put this in it, and it was like that. It was just really lovely state of creativity, and flow.
To start at the start, born in Glasgow, and then emigrated to Donegal. Then in the
1971, 72, just that actually the very end of 71, going into 72.
Was it a big culture shock to change?
Well, it wasn't. I mean, the thing was that both my parents were from Donegal.
Okay.
And so Donegal was really home. I've said it a few different times in interviews, but that is like when I'd be walking down the street with my mother, say coming home from school, and we'd meet another Donegal woman, and she'd end up standing talking to this woman for ages in the street. When you're a kid and you're just and talking, they're talking, and they're talking about home. Were you home and that, and all the home, and I think, like, we live there, and but that wasn't home. It was never home. Home was always Donegal, and her community, she'd always go visit, and always be Donegal houses that we'd be visiting all around parts of Glasgow, and our school was Holy Cross in Govan Hill, which was just all Donegal as well. Like, I can still remember the roll call from our classroom. Well, most of it, some I missed out, but most of them were Donegal names.
Yeah.
There was Coyles, Boyles, Gallagher's, Doherty's, and a lot would go back to Donegal for their summer holidays as well, as we all did. Like what they used to call the Glasgow Fair Saturday. All Glasgow Donegal people would head back to Donegal.
And that's something that you kind of explored in your earlier work, say the Derry boat and stuff like that. That's always about that connection between Donegal and Scotland.
That, I think part of that was a justification as well. It was there's different aspects to it, but people would say to me, where are you from? And I say Donegal. They say, oh, you've got a very Scottish accent. And I say, I was born in Glasgow. They say, oh, you're Scottish? I say, no, I'm Donegal. Like, so it's like, and people are looking at you like, particularly people in the East Coast, but it's less, I suppose if it's Liverpool and Dublin, they probably get it, But the thing about it is, I was up in Donegal the weekend. If you're in West Donegal, Gweedore and all that, like a Glasgow accent is a natural accent to have in Gweedore, whereas a Dublin accent, not so much now, but there was a time, like say in the 70s, like a Glasgow accent was a local accent, whereas a Dublin accent was or a southern accent was always guards or school teachers or something, or priests. It was always as an outsider accent.
Yeah. So when you came back to Donegal, it was in secondary school that you got involved in kind of punk bands and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, there was no punk when I started. It was when I'd come over on holidays to Donegal, I had cousins who'd play in bands, and and my parents, they're on holidays, so they go to pubs a lot for their holidays, and we're hearing a lot of Irish pub music.
Yeah.
Which, bad as it was live music, and it was really interesting, and there was electric guitars and that, and the occasional pop song played. Like, and when you're young, below 10 and around that age, you're just a pop song's a pop song. You're not. So then when I went to secondary school, I mean, that could inspire me when I go back to Glasgow.
Yeah.
I'd have all that and whatever other musical interests I had. So when we came back in start of 1972, say, my musical influences would have been like, I've really depended heavily on music, because you talk about the culture shock. There was a real culture shock in the sense that we were back about a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, a month, about the 30th of January. And we were in Letterkenny, and Derry was 20 miles away, and Bloody Sunday happened.
Oh wow!
And that's so that was a real shock.
Yeah.
Because even though I'd consider myself being Donegal, I was still brought up with movies about the British Army saving World War II and all these benign characters, like particularly the films of the 60s and there was chaps who'd go in their bomber planes and get their legs blown off, but they were decent chaps, and all these decent chaps and these things like that. And I mean, we'd had, from the trouble started, initially the British Army was supposed to go and defend the Catholics from from being burnt out, and there was that aspect to it. Then obviously I was educated because our extended family were all Republican. Well, not in a big R way, but
they were Catholics, so they had that leaning.
And they knew what the British Army. They were just the truth of it.
Yeah,
the British Army were doing what the British Army was doing, but there's still that bit that you're not ready. Nobody was really ready for the fact that on a Sunday afternoon the British Army would go and shoot dead 13 people.
Yeah,
and so that was a really big shock, for everyone. Like, in that Sunday, like, my cousin coming home, I was out playing, and I think I was actually playing with Action Men. And I remember that was at the Action Men, like, they ended up being left in a potato ditch or something, like the trench. I never went back to Action Man after that for some reason. I don't know what the connection was. It was an age thing, I suppose. But it was like coming back and saying, turn on the television, the radio, and just the state of shock that lasted for days, weeks, months, just that, because it progressed into different things, the funerals. And as a child, there was that. I mean, I suppose it's a part of the different stages of growing. As a child, I thought that this is going to get sorted. Mm-hmm. They won't get away with this. There will be justice. You can't just do that. And for me, as a child, it was really evident on the day what had happened, from even the news clips, apart from hearing stories. It was really evident what had happened. And now somebody's, like, the cavalry will come, because that's what you always think as a kid. The cavalry will arrive, reinforcements, or the UN will go in, or whatever, it's going to be resolved, and then you suddenly think, no, this is what happens. Denial, and injustice. And then, I mean, in the locale, and particularly in Derry, well, they say that, like, everyone joined the IRA in Derry that night, like, kind of, an exaggeration, but to a large degree, that a lot of that happened, and a lot of that happened in Donegal as well, and there was really strong feelings. So that really was influential and shocking and disillusioning, about the world. There is no justice. And then at the same time, I was starting to go to school, like the last Christian Brothers, or the Presentation Brothers in Letterkenny, the last of that, and then going into secondary school, and the vision of Catholic Ireland. That this is 1972. Your future, what's your future? There was nobody saying, hey, you should get into rock and roll. There's none of that, or the arts. Nobody talked about art. So it was a really oppressive time and a frightening time for me personally.
Of course,
even though I didn't know what was going on, it was just like that. But at the same time, it was also the time when you had, like, I heard Jimi Hendrix, and you think, wow, yeah, no, you suddenly come, no, there is more to life than is being presented on the television or the radio or in my parents' life or any of the people around me. There's Jimi Hendrix. Then there's the songs that there was Schools Out. Out that summer. Hawkwind's Silver Machine. There was, some really brilliant music was happening, and I was at the age where I could appreciate it. Also, I lived in a part of Letterkenny called the Old Town. And one day I remember hearing this motorbike kind of sound, and go out the front gate, and this guy goes past in a chopper motorbike, big chopper handlebars, and and long red hair flowing in the wind, and a t-shirt, yellow t-shirt with Black Power t-shirt, and Black is Beautiful or something. And what was it? And this was the Old Town. This is there as it. And Ted Ponsonby is this guitar player, well-known guitar player. He's session. He's played with so many people. Locally, by Sean Keeney would have toured with, and Mary Black. All these. He's toured Dolores Kane. He's incredible guitar player. So I remember him as a neighbour with long hair playing guitar. And they had a band called the Rascals that played not hits, pop hits. Yeah. But say, for example, the night Thin Lizzy didn't turn up, they were supposed to be playing in the Butt Hall Balbuffet 73, around that, or the end of 72. Whiskey in the Jar was in the charts.
On then, yeah.
Yeah. Thin Lizzy had maybe 2 albums out, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 albums out of that. Beautiful albums. No, 3 actually out there. Build on them. Beautiful albums. And we're all Thin Lizzy fans. We all went to Balbuffet to see Thin Lizzy, and it turns out the previous night, there was no Twitter to tell you about that, but the previous night Eric Bell had freaked out and walked off stage. So the Rascals played instead in the Butt Hall Balbuffet, and they played Focus, Hocus Pocus. And they played the most amazing fucking set you ever saw in their, the songs that they couldn't play, or they wouldn't play when they were playing colleges, they're really heavy set. And
that's the yodeling song and the flute and all that.
And then so they had that, and I remember saying to Ted, so Ted, as you are, like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, same thing. So Ted, who's your favourite guitar player? And he says, I don't know what is Segovia or Django Reinhardt, and I'm kind of expecting, is it Rory Gallagher? No, Segovia, Django Reinhardt. So you're getting this. That's where you were getting exposed to kind of art in that form. Visual art would just be album covers.
Yeah.
But the nourishment that you'd get from all that sustained me and inspired me. Yeah. And then in a community level, like those young kids was into, different things in bands. So I started up a local band with a friend.
Is that the Joe Petrol and the Petrol Bombs?
No, that's the myth of Joe Petrol and the Petrol Bombs is funny, because the first band started off as a guy, Hugo Devlin, who's I think the World Draft Champions.
Oh, right.
The drafts. He's the World Draft Champion. I don't know if he still is, but that's interesting. So anyway, myself and Hugo got a band together doing Sylvia's Mother.
Okay.
And we had 2 songs, Sylvia's Mother, and then Scarborough Fair with our own words to it, my own words to it. And we entered a couple of companies. That was it. So it was pretty dodgy kind of stuff. And then we done a first year in the secondary school. We'd done another concert. We had a drummer who became the drummer because he had a drum kit, but he was a boarder in the school. So the drum kit was in Balbuffet. He was in Letterkenny, so he never actually drummed with us, but he's still in the band. And so we done another competition at the school, and. So gradually you'd end up, then we got a local drummer, and his downed a music shop, repair shop, and television repair. We'd play out in their place, and then we got a local guitar player, and that's when things really took off. It'd be like winters in garages when we're learning Rolling Stones songs, and it was just really a lovely thing to be doing. You'd have the microphone, the vocal microphone, you'd be putting it into the Vox AC amp, the guitar player's amp, and it was just so chaotic, and
And is that Hemlock then was a different band?
That was So this was a really good time. Our first band were called Ambrose. for Ambrose Slade.
So because they were called that.
They were called Ambrose Slade when they were Skinhead band. They were Ambrose Slade. So we called ourselves Ambrose. Our lead guitar player, was country and Irish kind of thing. Like he'd play Apache and things like that. It was really, really good. But he entered us for a competition in the local. I don't know what's the word. It's a mental health care facility now, but at the time it was called The Mental.
Oh, right.
And it's an old asylum kind of thing. They'd have a competition, talent competition there. So he entered us there, and he got the name wrong. It was Ambro. So we became Ambro. And an interesting thing about that was we were Ambro, and we played in the competition. We got second in that. We developed, we beat a couple of local bands and that. But when Ambro kind of broke up for a while, we joined up with this other guitar player, guitar to play guitar, but he was really into progressive rock. Okay. And he was into Yes. Yeah. So we started up a band. His band was called Fragile. When I say his band was called Fragile, they were a totally conceptual band. They didn't actually do anything. You know, all they existed in was scratching the name into the desk and all that.
A lot of those going around.
Ambro joined with Fragile, and we became Ambrogile. That's brilliant. That was a very brief progressive rock thing. And then Hemlock came then, which was playing youth club hops and playing dance halls. In the summer, we'd go down West Donegal, where there'd be a lot of young northern people would be down on holidays, or like they just mass exodus from Belfast to Donegal in the summer, and the dances would be really good like that. We'd play down, and there we could play our full set. We're still at school. During the school term, we'd probably play Relief, which was support bands to country and Irish bands.
I was wondering how you were from a punk background and then supporting Philomena Begley. Yeah, it's a bit of a jump.
Well, I mean, punk still hadn't happened at this stage.
Okay, yeah.
It was. We were doing a couple of Rory Gallagher songs, and we do Pink Floyd's Time, and we do it slower than Pink Floyd done it, so it was very slow.
Yeah,
and we'd be playing support to say, as we say, Philomena Begley, and it'd be local girls, maybe from the factory, and that would arrive there early. They'd be dancing, and we'd be playing "Taking Away the Moments," and they'd still be jiving to it. They were most incredible. They'd be able to jive to anything, you know. But it was really frustrating because we'd learn a couple of cover songs, like Bay City Roller songs and pop songs, which is like, it was hard enough playing Rory Gallagher or bluesy stuff.
Yeah.
But at least you could go for the feel and the emotion of it. But like when you tried to do pop, we sounded really odiously bad.
Yeah,
we were chronic, and then when they split up was around 76, and that's when I was into Bowie, into lots of different kinds of things. But it was around 76 that you start hearing about the Sex Pistols through the Musical Express.
And when was the Stiff Little Fingers and stuff, the stuff from Northern Ireland? That's later, is it?
That would have been later. It's funny because Joe Petro and the Petrol Bombs was a band that I started up with me. There was no one else wanted to be a punk in Donegal at the time, so that was
the only punk in Donegal.
There was a guy called Ed McGinley.
It's a name for a show for you there.
There's a guy called Ed McGinley who's a musician. He's got a band and he lives in Dublin now, and he was really good. He was interested in punk, but nobody else was even interested in it at that stage, 1976, 77. But when I went to London in 77, I came back, so went wherever it was, September I think, went to London, and I came back at Christmas, and you'd go to the Golden Grill, which was usually country and Irish.
Yeah.
And so New Year's Eve, 77 going into 78, there was a band called Toe Jam playing, and they were progressive rock. There'd be a 3-piece. Drummer would do a 15-minute solo. Do you know, they'd play Pink Floyd covers. They'd do big guitar solos, all that. And so that was better than country and Irish.
Yeah.
So I remember going out that night and I had a zip top that I'd got actually in Kings Road, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it now, but it looked really good. But a zipper t-shirt kind of thing, lots of zips on it, and I had a spiky dog collar, and I had different things. My mother had to fix the dog collar on me. It was footery kind of thing, you know. And so
at least she let you out.
Yeah, she let me out. She was born in 1920. I've got a lovely story. Remind me to tell you about a story about my mother, a little bit in Jimi Hendrix. But went to the Golden Grill, and there was a band playing support to Toe Jam and it was the Undertones.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
And they were fucking brilliant. It's so good to curse, is it?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
of course, yeah, of course.
And the Undertones were just amazing. They were really, and they were doing covers at that stage. They were doing Gloria,
Yeah.
and Anarchy in the UK,
Yeah,
and they were amazing.
I would say so.
Yeah.
And what was the initial push to go to London then? Just because you lived there for a time, correct?
I lived there for almost 5 years, kind of. Yeah.
And then you kind of started doing the kind of more theatrical kind of side of things while you were over there.
Yeah. Well, when I went to London, my whole thing was that I'd become a punk star or something, and because there was no avenues.
Yeah.
And even then, as Thin Lizzy's quote it in Shades of Blue Orphanage, they're headed for the #1 hit country again. And there's always regarded that if you're going to do original music, you'd have to leave Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know, all that seemed to be the way of it, Frupp were progressive rock, they'd have moved, were regales, everyone moved to, and London, I think from all over, wherever you were, you went to London if you weren't in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And what happened was, I thought this was it. I'd go to London, and I moved into a squat. There was 2 squats right next to each other in Islington with Donegal lads. So it was like Little Donegal.
Yeah.
And
Again.
yeah. Which was really interesting because Donegal, they were a bit hippie. There's
Yeah.
one called Pat Ferry, God rest him now. But I remember that was at my first morning in London, 5 o'clock in the morning. Myself and my friend knocking at the door at the squat, and this guy coming down with long hair, Y fronts and cowboy boots. Yeah. And I thought, oh no, wasn't punk. I went down that weekend. I went down to down there in Soho. There was a market, and there was a guy selling records, and they had some notices up for band people wanted for bands, and I was inquired with this guy about I wanted to be in a punk band. I said, well, you? And I had some punk clothes, but in this stage I was wearing parallel boot boys. I looked like an Undertone.
Yeah.
I had a Harrington jacket on me. I looked in the Doc Martens, so I looked more like a boot boy.
Yeah.
And so that was it. I worked in the building sites, took drugs, and wrote poetry.
Okay.
But around it was really interesting at that time because I wrote poetry in Donegal as well. There was John Cooper Clarke.
Yeah, yeah.
So poetry was more, and Patti Smith. I knew about Patti Smith in Donegal, but when I went to London, there was John Cooper Clarke as well. So there was that notion of performance poetry.
Yes, yeah.
And then Linton Kwesi Johnson came later on,
Mm-hmm.
So it was that whole really vibrant stuff. So that's when, and the thing as well was finding musicians that had the same commitment. Like the bands in Letterkenny, they wanted to do their leaving cert and all that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I kind of wanted to be so it felt like performance poetry. I could do that by myself, but there was no gigs at that stage for that sort of thing. And I was floundering around the place, experimenting with things, and long story. Lots of things happened in between because, I can divert. I joined the Hare Krishnas for 8 months.
Oh yeah,
you can go there if you want, kind of thing. I was about to join. I met these Ras. I got into Rasta for a while. So I was hanging out with Rastas, and because punk was all about reggae music, really. From
when it started,
and that was really big in London at the time. Lots of fantastic reggae music, and the Royal Razzas. Lots of bands that come straight from Jamaica, and it was just really beautiful reggae music. We lived in North London and East London, so you heard the best music. But I came back to Letterkenny again, and it all happens in Letterkenny. Come back to Letterkenny in a pub, look out the window at the folk festival. 2 Rastas go walking past. What the fuck? Go out, hey, and start talking. And it turns out that they're from a band, the Steel and Skin band, and we have good fun. I meet them up in London again, and myself and this guy Finbar Bravo, brilliant musician, brilliant pan player, but really incredible pan player. One of the best ones. Also drummer and that, and they had mixed African music and Caribbean music, but me and him would I suppose a few joints, and talk about spiritual matters and that, and that Rasta way of, well, he wasn't Rasta, but there was that sense of
He was that kind of
that kind
inclined.
of spiritual kind of. We're smoking dope.
Yeah.
And we had this kind of notion that we'd go to Trinidad. We'd go back to Trinidad.
Oh, right.
And go up the mountains, and I would learn to play pan, because I'd go out when they'd be doing gigs. I'd go out with them as well, because I was used to being a plasterer's labourer, so I was really good at carrying 40-gallon drums and things like that. But anyway, yeah, I went to this whole. I couldn't believe my last thing. This is great, you know. My life is in a really nice creative space.
Yeah, it seems
because
like it,
you know, but it felt like that. It felt like doors were opening to me.
Yeah.
But then the spiritual aspect of it, I thought, this is because I've got a spiritual attitude, you know, because my life is changing in that sense. So then I go into a Hare Krishna restaurant one day, start talking to this guy who's into music, and this was a time when a lot of punks was into, like polystyrene was into Hare Krishnas at that stage. So it was a generational shift within the Hare Krishnas.
Okay.
And the guy says to me, he says, yeah, man, you'd like back to Vedanta Manor, you know, the place George Harrison. Yeah, come there and play some music, chill out. And so that was a whole other adventure for 8 months kind of thing, you know, shaved head and that. And which opened me up to Indian modal music and different things like that.
Yeah.
So sorry, I go on a bit when I get started. This kind of you start at the beginning,
fantastic.
you have to go through to the ending of it kind of thing.
Yeah, well, we need a basis for everything else that comes afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, and then you ended up performance theatre and stuff like that, and performance poetry, and then you landed back in Dublin, and then you were on Grafton Street for a long time.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a guy whose Hare Krishna was called Jai Govinda, who was they actually had a Hare Krishna theatre company, and which was really interesting. This guy was an incredibly creative actor, and he left around the same time as me, kind of thing, black guy, and brilliant fucking British accent, you know, rather.
Yeah.
And he can do really brilliant presence, incredible performer. And he'd started busking, doing street down in Covent Garden. Covent Garden hadn't been organised, legitimised yet, or that whole, the fame or the reputation of Covent Garden.
Yeah.
And he used to do craft work and things like that, and he would do robotics. Robotics was new as well. And he'd do a robotic, no one's doing robotics, it was just all new, and he'd do robotics with a white face, and it was incredible, and just mind-blowing the fact that it was also new and people really loved it. So at the same time, alternative cabaret was happening, so there was live poets, there was a whole political response to Margaret Thatcher, there was really wild feminist acts like Cunning Stunts and that, you know, who were trying out different things. There was bands like Pookie Snackenberger, who became Stomp. Don't you remember Stomp? They're a percussion band. That and the Flying Pickets, who subsequently had a #1 hit. You know, so it was really happening. Alternative cabaret circuit when people were experimenting with stuff. So I was part of a committee, was putting on gigs. I started doing stand up there with poetry, and with the white face that this guy had taught me. Decided that I'd go back to Dublin. Went busking in Grafton Street.
Was this under
Grafton Street?
Your persona, the Zen McGonagall?
Yeah, Zen McGonagall. I used to write poetry kind of thing as well, and I'd be looking for personas like that, and I'd do kind of little fanzine poetry kind of things to justify being alive to myself, kind of thing. And very bad poetry. And then I arrived over in Dublin, and I thought I'd go busking. I had a tailcoat and Bowie baggy trousers and a white face, and I went to Dame Street. I thought, this is a bus, there's lots of people here, but there was all traffic, it was buses, it was the worst spot, a total neophyte, nobody, only the stupidest person would think about busking there, particularly when you're doing poetry, you know, it's like, and so I'm there, excuse me, and the only one to stop was this little traveller girl, and I'm doing these poems influenced by my lifestyle and Jack Kerouac. You know, I'd be an Irish kind of Jack. I'd be kind of like can you see the federal agents hidden in the branches of the cherry tree? Some mornings that tree is like a circus. There's a half brown loaf in a plastic bag somewhere. I would like the cicadas to have it. Stuff like mad shit, you know. That you could actually pull off when you're doing an alternative cabaret crowd.
Yeah.
But here I am in Dublin and Dame Street with buses going by, and one little traveller girl looking at me, nodding her head in agreement when I say, "Can you see the federal agents hidden in the branch?" And she's nodding her head, and she keeps putting money into the hat.
Fair play to her.
So every poem I'd finish, she'd put money in. So she, like a couple of. So she was my first audience, really, not proper audience, you know, that was just for me, wasn't the part of it.
Yeah,
and she stayed, and the fact that she held me in that, because otherwise I would have given up.
Yeah.
She held me in a space long enough for a street trader. This was the time when the street traders used to get run by the guards. They didn't have legitimate.
Okay, yeah.
So that the jewellery sellers and all that. And that traveller girl held me in place long enough for the street trader to come past and say, "You're in the wrong place. You should go to Henry Street." Grafton Street wasn't even pedestrianised then. So I went to Henry Street, and I made 20 quid doing a show. And it was like, that was it. That was my, I thought, wow, that means I'm a professional. Do you know, I'm a professional performer. I can make a living.
Yeah.
20 quid is a lot of money in the 80s as well, yeah.
In 82, yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
And what was Dublin like at that time?
It was really interesting, actually, because it was those things, it was, particularly coming from London, it was very friendly, and there was a lot of different things going on, you know. It was very friendly. McDade's part, there's a lot of rough pubs, rough in the sense of good rough, you know, old style pubs. A lot of old Dublin types still around, you know. It still had this vestige, and funny because I went to the O'Casey plays during the Galway Arts Festival.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that really poetic language and playfulness with language. People say beautiful things. There was that.
Yeah.
Very friendly. I wasn't there long. Henry Street was brilliant because people would be gathering crowds, and the guards would come to move you on. And I remember going over to the Garda car. Him with the window rolled down calls me over. I'm standing at the Garda car talking to him, and he says, "Do you see what's happening now?" I says, "What?" He says, "Look over," and the crowd is putting money into my hat, and he says, "See if we put you up against the wall now, they'd be throwing fivers in that hat." You know? And it was like that. It was just the north side. It was obviously that particular, you know, like, leave me alone, you know. And then Grafton Street became pedestrianised, and that was really exciting. There was just so many characters around it.
Yeah.
Drinking McDade's old, which was still the vestige of the Kavanagh and Brenda Behan and all that. You know, there's lots of that.
Yeah.
Literary kind of Dublin, drunken literary Dublin was still there. There was lots of poets. There was interesting things happening musically, and politically. It was a really interesting time politically as well, because you had the amendment, the amendment that were just after repealing a couple of years ago. That amendment came in 1983, I think. So that was all going on at that time. There was gay rights was happening, and it wasn't. I went in the first march because I quickly joined this group, the Grapevine Arts Centre. That was quite radical in many ways, and I remember we went on the first. It was a gay rights. Somebody get killed in Fairview, I think it was at that time, but it was a gay rights march. That counts as the first Pride march.
Okay,
but it wasn't really a pride march. It was more gay rights.
Yeah,
and it was more like
with David Norris and all that
it was
kind of
nearly,
stuff.
and it was just, you had to go in it just for solidarity,
Yeah,
to show that you were with, you know, and so it was like that, and we're a bit self-conscious as well, kind of thing. And it was funny because there was lots of gay men who didn't go in the parade as well because it would have been really dangerous.
Of course, yeah.
You know,
sure, it was still illegal at that stage.
it was illegal as well. Yeah, I mean, it's mad to think politically where Ireland was at that stage. I mean, I think it was in the 90s that up to the 90s, I think it was
94.
legal.
I think it was when it
But
was
it's
abolished.
also, it was legal for rape within marriage at that stage.
Jesus.
You know, up to that.
Yeah.
It was so, yeah. So it was very interesting at that time, and other things had happened. Like there was a TV club, which is called the TV Club, which was reggae bands had played. Dennis Desmond from MCD organised it. She'd end up with reggae acts had come over every 2 weeks to play there.
Oh, wonderful!
And then there'd be a DJ for the week in between.
Yeah.
So I used to get a gig toasting there. I should be up in the balcony, kind of thing. Nobody'd see me. spliff, and my friend, this guy, the operator,
Yeah.
Liam, and so you'd just be doing, it'd be all dub records.
Yeah.
And it was just great. It was great.
Yeah.
An echo chamber kind of thing. You'd be there, it's brilliant. You'd sing a bit of a melody. You know, she loves you, yeah, yeah. You know, Baltimore playing in the background or something. So it was creatively, it was very, very exciting, particularly for me with the Grapevine Arts Centre as well. There was, it was, and I grew hoarse, drinking McDade's. So now I had money. A bit more, and McDade's would do slate for buskers, so you'd get free drink. You know, you put your name down. Not you get free drink, but you could, you know, if you didn't have cash,
you could put it on tab.
You put it on tab, kind of thing.
That's great.
For all the buskers had that kind of thing. So, and McDade's back in the day, but so drinking, smoking cigarettes, and partying. I went hoarse from shouting in the pub, and so I couldn't do my poetry. And there was a guy there who was from Scotland, Castlemock, used to do Bowie covers. So I mimed, as I'm glad there wasn't so much video evidence of it. I must have been the worst mime in the world, but I didn't know that. Thank God I didn't know it.
Yeah.
So I done it. So be doing 5 years pushing through the market square, and I'd be doing all this very literal mime stuff. And Velvet Underground, Femme Fatale, really good stuff. So that got me to the next stage. So now I'm a mime artist.
Yes.
And as I was on my way to Henry Street to Busk, Grafton Street still wasn't pedestrianised. Some of the street sellers and the newspapers say, "How you doing, Charlie?" Because they had the baggy trousers and the tailcoat. Morning jacket was actually, "How you now, Charlie? Ah, Charlie." So they all started to call me Charlie. And so I'd do the Charlie Chaplin walk for the crack and start to integrate that into it as well. And then I got a copy of Charlie Chaplin's My Life, bought a bowler hat and a cane. Nicky, the musician, had gone away. So I started to do Charlie Chaplin at the same time as Grafton Street became pedestrianised. And so creatively, for me, it was a time of evolution and trying out things that I never thought at any stage that I would be doing Charlie Chaplin. But when I went that direction, I had no videos to study. So you're studying from stills and from memory, but you realise what a great memory of Chaplin films there was, and intuitively picked up so much Chaplin stuff.
Yeah.
And immediately had to start writing sketches that would be long enough that would be able to stop an audience in the street, entertain them for a while, and that they would pay for it.
Yeah.
So it was just very basic performance skills that you'd have to learn. Then, as I say, with Grapevine Arts Centre, started collaborating with people and doing late night cabaret again with my poetry and experimenting just in lots of ways. So it was a very, very creative time for me.
And how did you transport then from Grafton Street in Dublin then all the way over to Barna and the West Coast here?
Well, in 1983, with the Grapevine Arts Centre, I'd done my first national tour. So that's 40 years ago this year since I first toured nationally in an old Volkswagen van, and we were doing a kids show called The Time Cupboard. It was a great adventure. Like, we went everywhere. We're in the north. We played Belfast in 1983 and Loyalist Estates. That sounds very dramatic actually. We played in 2 Loyalist Estates off the Shankill Road, which was very dramatic as well, because you're going into this estate with Loyalist murals in a van, Volkswagen van.
Was it Irish reg?
With Dublin registration.
Yeah, Jesus.
And apart from that, it was a hippie van. It was like a yellow Volkswagen with red, it was very conspicuous. And, but at the same time, we were treated really, really well and really nicely and warmly and welcomed and appreciated, which, and this was, 1983 was a dangerous time to be going, you didn't go where you weren't supposed to go.
I can imagine, yeah.
So there was that, and there was just lots of adventures that we'd have in the van. We'd stay on the road sometimes. We had no place to stay. We'd rather than go back to Dublin, so we'd end up coming down to Kinvara and crashing on floors. And
whose floor were you crashing on down here?
I think one time we crashed on Jackie Daly's floor.
Okay, yeah.
When he wasn't there, it was a girlfriend of his.
Yeah,
was minding the house, and our van driver was from America as well, and it's just seeing as Yeah, better be careful what I say here. But anyway, we arrived at the house late one night, and we ended up, I think it was only one night or maybe 2 nights we crashed there, and a few floors in Galway and things like that, and yeah, it was a lovely time. So that I got the bug then for the touring.
Yeah.
Well, you know all about that.
About what now?
The touring.
Oh, touring. Yeah. Oh, it's great crack.
Right.
I couldn't do it anymore.
And what were you playing when you were touring?
I was playing banjo in a band in the States.
Right.
And but I was like, I was 20. It was during my 20s when we were at it, and it was the perfect thing for me. It was bread and butter. I loved it.
Yeah.
Visited nearly every state bar, like 5 or 6 of them. Played in all of them, and I can go to sleep at 5 a.m. and wake up at 9 and be completely fine and do that for months.
Yeah.
And these days, I don't think I could do that anymore. You know.
Yeah.
But it was tremendous fun.
It's the way to see the world, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah.
It's different.
And you connect with everyone too. It's
Yeah.
like there's a great connection in that way, because it's like you're bringing sort of an element of sort of excitement to the area you go to.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to engage with people, I find.
Yeah, and the chaos and the adventures as
and
well.
And that as well, yes.
It's all, mad stuff happens as well. It kind of,
oh yeah,
things go wrong.
And, yeah. And not very much money.
And not very much money, yeah, which leads to more things. The improvisation.
Exactly,
like
yeah, of course.
And totally. Hitching and things like that as well. And
Oh,
that was
yeah.
another thing that was really common around the 80s in Ireland, was you'd hitch everywhere.
Yeah, of course.
Because there wasn't a proper service.
Yeah.
And people just done it. Which
Yeah.
meant, what happened then was that I started to, I love the west of Ireland, and so I'd naturally, when the summer would come, I'd want to go west, and I'd hitch, and you go to Willie Clancy week or whatever it was, and you'd be hitching somewhere, and you'd be going, like, say, from Galway to Clare or Galway to Cork, and you'd be on the road, and somebody'd pull up, and you get into the car, and they'd be going to Clare or West Clare. So you say, "Oh, I'll go to West Clare." Yeah. So you just go sometimes where the car was going.
Yeah, of course.
And
yeah.
it would be like a whole adventure there, kind of thing, you know. And the country was mad and wilder.
Oh,
I think
it was
very wild. I think at that particular time.
I used to hitch a good bit up till about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and every time you get picked up, they just go, "Geez, you don't see anybody hitching anymore."
Yeah.
That was the first thing they'd always say.
Always.
You
Even
know?
my early 20s was at it the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose you pick up a younger person easier.
You would, yeah.
Then there's something, you'd be frightened of older people, kind of thing, like myself. Like I know that myself. Is like, when at times I did have to hitch in later years.
Yeah.
I found people kind of giving you a wide berth.
Yeah.
They never pick you up in the rain either, because they don't want someone wet in the car.
Yeah.
So when you transported then over to Barna and stuff like that, you got involved in Macnas early on.
Well, I'd go to Galway for the summers, and then I'd go back to Dublin in the winter and until 1986, and I'd had enough, like, paying rent and difficulty, all that stuff. It wasn't working right with me, and it was fun to drink,
Of course.
and so philosophically, I thought the best thing to do is like the Woody Guthrie way, and to and the Shanachie way, really.
Mm-hmm.
Just stay on the road the whole time.
Yeah.
And just arrive. You're welcome at the start of the weekend, and you leave on a Monday and go like that. You know, which was great for the summer. It really worked.
Yeah,
and I slept in hay sheds and had lots of adventures like that. And I was very familiar with Galway, because I had so many friends in Galway, and Galway was pure mad, and them just brilliant.
Oh, I can imagine.
So they until winter came, and I decided to stay in Galway, and that was just at the point where Macnas were starting in '86, and then it was the whole Macnas adventure, which was something totally new, because there was nothing like that happening anywhere.
What is Macnas like?
Macnas, for people who listen, Macnas, the name Macnas means exuberant joy, but a particular kind of joy, that when calves are locked up, young cows is locked up for the winter and fed in sheds and barns, when they're let out in the spring, they go mad.
Yeah.
And the smell of grass, and they start to dance and they leap up and down. So it's Macnas is Irish word for that level of joy and exuberance.
I love that.
Macnas was a group that was formed by 4 people at the time: Porrig Brannock, Ollie Jennings, later famous the Arts Festival and Saw Doctors. Well, he'd already been organising the Arts Festival at that stage, as had Porrig Brannock, had been a large part of it as well. Peter Salmon, who I knew for years as well as a performer, director, and Tom Conroy, a visual artist who works mostly in movies now. But they started a community arts group. They got an old shed down in the Fisheries Field, very run down shed from the college. They were all alumni of the college, and they started out this community group.
It's kind of traditional beating heart is Fishery Field.
Yeah, it's still and that's where they're still located. And at that time as well, not just in Galway but everywhere, the arts were basically subsidised by employment schemes, like Grapevine tour that I talked about. We were on a youth employment scheme, so that was the way that performers were kind of paid. They were taken off the dole, and Macnas, it was getting everybody off the dole. But at that stage, who was on the dole in Galway? There'd be people like
fucking everyone.
Everyone. Yeah, it was there was no work. But there was the Wall brothers. The Stunning. There was Leo Moran out of the Saw Doctors. Do you know who the Saw were just starting off? So these bands were just starting off at the time, pretty much. There was Brendan O'Regan. There was just really a creative bunch that were brought together, and it was fantastic. And it was all really innovative, and it was figuring out how to do these things. There was great ideas, and it was very inspired by El Comedians, the Spanish company, or Footsparn as well. So it was inspired by these great companies, but there was no Irish equivalent, and there was a lot of experimentation. And we'll have a dragon. How do you make a dragon? And so there's bits of timber in it, and the materials would be really heavy. So there was a lot of challenges, but at the same time, there was an excitement that was in Galway, and it was genuine. The community, like when it come to the Arts Festival parade, and that, loads of people would be, everybody, there was no differentiation between I'm an artist and not. It was everybody was in the parade kind of thing. It was like
that's wonderful.
I'd say Mary Coughlin was probably knocking around Galway at that time and stuff.
She had just left a couple of years. She was still knocking around a bit, but around the Macnas time she lived in Dublin last year. I'd done a couple of things. I'd done a show when she went to Olympia. Mary had a residency in the Bagot Inn, and it was taken off really, really well. And I think Dennis Desmond of MCD was managing her, and somebody cancelled in the Olympia, and there was a week free in the Olympia.
Oh, nice.
And she said to Mary, would you do a week in the Olympia, which was a big step up. And Mary and Eric Visser, her producer, really beautiful man as well, they came up to me in the street in Grafton Street and says, would I be into doing something as part of that show? So at the start of the night, what had happened was the band would come on and they'd play this kind of carnival music, and I'd come on wearing a big red wig, wearing one of Mary's dresses with 2 balloons, and the audience would go mad. Suddenly, can I notice that's not Mary, and then I'd lie in a chaise-longue, and there'd be a blackout, and when the lights came back up again, it'd be Mary, which would be my place, and I'd have gone. And then halfway through, I'd come up from the back of the hall as Charlie Chaplin and climb up on the stage, and me and Mary would tango, and we'd just hold tango, ain't nobody's business what I do, tango, and we'd all choreographed, and at the end of it, she'd spin me around, kick me in the arse, and send me flying into the orchestra pit, and then I'd crawl out. So it was like that, and then at the very end, I'd come on again for the encore, I'd come on with a bunch of as Mary.
Yeah.
And Mary was brilliant. She didn't mind taking the piss out of herself.
Yeah.
And is that how you can end up in that Neil Jordan film then?
No, I know how. Well, I know how I ended up. What it was brilliant that Mary was in that, but it was Susie Figgis, who was the casting director, wanted to get away from the usual suspects. And there wasn't so many young actors or actors in Dublin, so they'd done a casting in Galway, and they told Macnas about it as well. So I went to that, and I got a call back, went up to Dublin, and Parry Brannock was in it as well, but I think he got cut from it. But so I started off as 2 days' work as an extra when they were filming in Limerick, actually.
Oh, was it Limerick that it was?
Limerick they started. And the thing about it was for those who don't know, it's a film called High Spirits by Neil Jordan. Neil was an emerging filmmaker at the time. It was a big budget film at the time. It was over $1 million. It was regarded as really big money.
A crazy cast in it. That was
mad cast, like Daryl Hannah and Liam Neeson,
Peter O'Toole, and there's the couple of Peter Gallagher, who was in Sex Lies and Videotapes, and the guy out of Steve Guttenberg
out of
Mahoney from
Police Academy.
Yeah.
I've never seen
Beverly
those films.
D'Angelo. Beverly D'Angelo, who's Nicole Miner's daughter, I think, as well. There's lots of really good, and from what do you call it? Faulty Towers. Sorry, my memory's gone.
If you look at the trailer on YouTube, you can see nearly every person in it.
Which
you'd
one
recognize
from Faulty Towers? Who from Faulty Towers?
What do you call her?
Connie Booth.
Okay. Yeah, Connie Booth. She's brilliant. Now there was really brilliant, nice people there, and but so I got there. So it ended up I just got 2 days' work as a special extra.
Yeah.
Went down to Limerick, and staying in Jury's Hotel. That was the poshest hotel in Limerick at the time, at Jury's by the river, and
still is.
The best thing about that was like my first morning was like there's all these people. It was filmed in a place called not Knockdoe, somewhere outside Limerick in this castle up on top of a hill, and there's lots of local people's kind of gathered to see because Peter told all these famous people's in it, and so the first morning I'm there, and everybody else is in set. I wasn't wanted until later. And there's this white Rolls Royce who's been used in one of the scenes. So rather than getting another taxi or part of the crew transport to bring me out, because they'd already done runs to bring everybody all out, says, well, the Rolls Royce is going out anyway. You go in with the Rolls Royce, kind of things like that. So like out of all the big stars, I'm the one who arrives in the white Rolls Royce. So God, you know, like Peter O'Toole arrived in a Mercedes. This guy's arrived in a white Rolls Royce. He must be bigger than us. So it was like there's things, funny things that, and but there was no interior in that. It was all exterior shots.
Okay.
I was supposed to do 2 days, and then Neil says, "No, I want you to stay." My character didn't have a name, so Peter O'Toole refers to me as Little John. I was the gatekeeper. So there's one scene, exterior scene, where you can see it on YouTube, where Peter pushes Mary, who's called Katie. It was a pulley system. We're trying to haunt the Americans. Donald McCann was in it as well. Like, I mean, talk about the American, but like Donald McCann, and Tom Hickey. I mean, that was the greatest privilege, was to be with those guys. But so, and Mary, of course. But Mary, so Peter O'Toole, we're up on top of this tower on a scaffolding to work a pulley system that'll fly Mary across in front of a tower window to scare these people. So Peter O'Toole pushes Mary away and he says, "Fly away, Katie!" And then he pushes me and says, "Fly away, Little John!" And Peter O'Toole was a serious hero of mine since I was a kid, you know. So like, that's about, of all the things in the world, that's, I suppose, my best moment.
That's great. It's a great
Peter
moment.
O'Toole said my name, and he was really beautiful and kind and generous.
Yeah,
and
I can imagine.
So I ended up with 2 weeks' work there, and at the end of that, there was a scene. It was on my birthday. It was in November. We're filming, and there's a scene where the people come out of the pub, and the assistant director turns to me and he says, "Little John, we don't. You're finished now. You can go." And Neil says, no, he's in this scene. He says, well, he's not. He says, yeah, he's in the scene now. I want him to cut. So I come out of the pub with everybody else. The fact that I came out of the pub meant that I had to be in the pub. And there was no interior stuff done. There was a little shell of a castle.
Yeah.
So it meant that I had to go to Shepperton.
Nice.
for 6 weeks.
Nice.
And then the adventures there was great because myself and Mary both been fond of drink. We had great adventures. They tried the producers were a bit tight. I can say it now, and
yeah, it's a long time ago. They won't get you now.
Especially the assistant producer when the assistant wrote down, says, "Have you got mates in London?" I says, "Yeah." This is he knew that was going on. I didn't know. He says,
Yeah.
"Could you stay with them? That good mates?" I says, "Yeah, I could. Yeah." So they didn't get me accommodation.
Yeah.
Right. So that was okay. So we went to stay with a friend. Stayed in his flat. It was a small flat in Camden. Wasn't really working out. My partner at the time was over with me. She had opened up a squat in Camberwell.
Yeah.
The previous year so we ended up moving down to the squat in Camberwell, so this Mercedes had come and picked me up from the squat at 7 o'clock every morning, and it turns out I had other friends called the Seven Kevins. This band were living in the squats around the corner, so we had and I was getting paid daily, whack of money. It was just the best time in the world, and the Mercedes had dropped me off every evening outside the squat as well. And these Camberwell Rastas would be looking like, who the fuck's their man? Like, gets dropped off every evening. So it was, lots of adventures like that.
Yeah. So, pivoting back to your own work, when I started off the show, I said you were prolific. And kind of looking from when you started off writing your own one-man shows.
Right.
It's nearly every year or every second year that you're writing your own. So coming from your poetry background, as you're saying, you could enjoy being the center point in the show when it was just you producing everything and controlling everything, and that kind of seems to have leaked into your work because going forward, it's mainly you with people, with collaborators and stuff like that. And the first one that started off, that was the Derry Boat. And this was kind of part of like this Donegal trilogy, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. It was, what happened was, it's pretty much the band thing again, was I worked with the Puka Children's Theatre, or the Grapevine. I worked in theatre shows. Yeah. And it was the same thing as a band. Like, you'd put your heart and your soul into this show. I would do a run, and then that was it. It was over. You were back, unable to earn a living. So it was kind of a thing about an empowerment, and so I done it was kind of an aim that I tried to do. But then what happened really, the big significant thing for me was, like as I say, I was fond of the drink and the lifestyle. I get sober, so that just meant that I had more time and more energy and more focus to actually, and less. Listen, I'm not talking. This is just about me personally.
Yeah, of course.
Less bullshit. I'd be bullshitting and talking about all the work that I'd want to do and have great ideas, but I wouldn't carry anything through. Well, occasionally I would, but there'd be a desperation about it. I'd be doing street shows, and it's some great shows, I think, but there'd still be a desperation, and so it would change things dramatically when I stopped smoking dope and getting drunk.
Yeah.
And that was a big change. So then I'd done kids shows in the Galway Arts Festival, and then I started smoking dope again, and that was interesting as well. Just
that's Galway for you.
Seeing how it's like doing it that way. Does that work? And trying every way which I can to make that work, but it didn't really work. And I had done interesting things. I'd done a show in Marseille at that time with a sculptor, and so I had good adventures, but it just wasn't. It was only until 1998 when I'd been sober for a couple of years again, kind of thing, and that I'd done the Derry Boat, and we'd done it for the Errigal Arts Festival, in Donegal, and it was funny. It took off, like it worked really well, that festival. Then there was a Fringe festival in Galway that year, not this Fringe now, but we'd done it there, and it was a show here, a show there, and it was just it was a good show, but it just wasn't going anywhere. And then Mike Diskin booked us for 2 weeks in the studio in the town hall, and a guy came to see us in the studio in the town hall, and he told someone else, and we ended up going to Washington DC.
Oh wow!
With the Derry Boat, and playing in a 1,000-seater for 5 weeks, I think.
Wow.
And a 1,000-seater in Washington DC. The problem was that it was a 1,000-seater, but I think the biggest crowd we played to was about 120. And one night I think we played to 10. And Fridays and Saturdays you do 2 shows. I shouldn't be exposing all this, but the thing about it was that Kevin Duffy was the musician at that stage. Fergal Gallagher had done the music, but as a guy, Kevin Duffy was doing the music at that stage. Like we get so tight. We got really. The show was good before, but it got really fucking super tight, and then things happened. Like we got a good review in the Washington Post, and then I get nominated for Helen Hayes Award, which is like a Tony's.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
nice.
it just meant that when we came back to Ireland, Mike Diskins would start phoning up theatres and say, "This show, is really, that the whole Irish thing about like you like it in America."
Yeah.
So we ended up with gigs there. Then somebody saw it from Scotland, says we should contact. We ended up with 3 gigs in Scotland, and it sold out.
Yeah.
We never put because of the title, The Derry Boat, which at one stage I was thinking of calling it 21st Century Gale, which if I'd have called it that, nobody would have fucking went to it. But because he called it The Derry Boat, it started selling out places. They brought us back for other gigs. We went to the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow. It sold out before they started doing the publicity.
Wow.
They just had the title up because people knew the story, and because Donegal people was telling them in Glasgow. So we ended up like that. And then so that gave me the momentum to get into my habit of like a farmer, really trying to. And you part of necessity as well. Like it's like you do a tour, you have to write a new show. So, and then it became a creative habit. And became a solution to all my problems was that if I don't know what to do, I write a show.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, like when you say it becomes a habit, the Derry Boat was around 1998, then the Ballad of Jack Kettle 2000, Donda Esta Jesus Fahy.
The one in between was Dead On.
Dead On.
Yeah.
Well, see, I've a list of stuff that you have, but when I go through your social media, there's different shows here as well. There's so many stuff.
Yeah.
Then you've done this to Jesus Fahy, Country and Irish, Salt of the Earth, and then Rural Electric. That was the second part of the kind of Donegal trilogy.
Yeah. Was it the second part? Yeah. Well, they were all Country and Irish. Donegal. They were all actually nearly all of those shows was Donegal. A couple of them was Galway kind of based, but there was Country and Irish, which was more of the same part, which was about jazz and Derry during World War II. It was about a Donegal farmer. When you respond to things like the way that sometimes RTE hijacks the narrative of the nation and says this is Ireland and this is who we are, and you think, well, wait a minute. During World War II, there was jazz in Derry because the Luftwaffe couldn't bomb Derry. It was out of reach. So you ended up, there was dances happening in Derry. There was Marines were all based in Derry getting ready for D-Day.
Yeah.
You had this whole cultural thing happening in Derry that was quite exuberant, and you had the V records, as they were called. The famous jazz musician from Derry, Gay McIntyre, his father played in a band, came home with a V record of Benny Goodman. So I got into this whole notion about you could be a farmer in Donegal and be exposed to jazz in 19... so I explored that whole notion and brought it into contemporary times, and the fact that Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald played in Derry during World War II.
Wow.
And you find out these things, you think, that's really exciting. And then, so you could have a farmer in Donegal who has a son. The farmer's a jazz man. His son's into Dostoevsky, but they're farmers. So you're just playing with stereotypes. So that was the kind of follow-up one of that, And then there was Rural Electric,
and that's about like the last parishes to get the electric in the 50s or whatever.
And about a music fan as well, rock and roll fan. Yeah.
The one that really stood out to me, and you mentioned actually the name of it earlier, was The Mental. Yeah. And even the story of, you'll have to pronounce this gentleman's name, but Joseph Macrina?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. That's the concept of the, if you want to explain the concept maybe of the play and then who Joseph was.
Well, when I done the show, the Ballad of Jack Kettle, which was about 2 punks from Donegal who go to New York, and one of them gets shot and killed, and the other one brings his friend's ashes back to Donegal to put them on an old railway line. so that was the plot of the story, and there was a scene in that reminds him, where your guy remembers them as two young men, and they walk up past St. Connell's, which was the asylum, and they shout, "You'll never fucking get us," you know.
Yeah.
And so that was the year 2000, and then in 2005 I was commissioned by Axis Ballymun and the HSE to do a play about St. Connell's, and I thought, wow, the guy who survived the New York situation, what about that line that he says, "You'll never fucking get us," if he ends up as a resident in St. Connell's, if it's a kind of coming home for him, he's actually glad to be there because he breaks down in New York.
Oh yeah.
And he has a breakdown listening to Mink DeVille, and so he ends up, he's rescued from New York, from Alphabet City, and brought back to St. Connell's, and while he's there he discovers the story of Joseph Magrena, who was the Irish language poet who spent the last 40-50 years, I think, of his life in St. Connell's. Joseph had translated The Heart of Darkness into Irish in the 1930s.
Oh wow.
So Apocalypse Now, that Conrad's story, Joseph Conrad's story, that was the basis of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
But and so I was fascinated myself. I'd met him.
Oh, did you?
No,
yeah.
I didn't. I'd saw him once. I'd been up there, and somebody says, that's and they called him Joe Green up there, and in Ranafast he was often called Joe Green as well. But I met someone else from Donegal who were talking, and there's a book, Movalach Féin, and that Joseph had wrote. It had never been translated into English, but this friend of mine had translated it into English. It was never published, so he gave me that. I couldn't read the Irish of it, and it was just the most incredible book. You know, like it's things like that Kerouac would have been writing. Obviously, we're not talking about black jazz clubs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
But it hasn't got all the Americana stuff, but the attitude and the adventures were very similar, and the style of writing about tramping, and obviously had difficulties with mental health, but some incredible things behind. Like at one situation, he's in London, and he ends up doing a talk, which it was for a group of for an African group, right? And I think it was around the time of the White Star Line and the Black Star Line, you know, like this whole African movement.
Mm-hmm.
And he spoke at a library, and you just think, like, the situations he was getting himself into as well for the times that were in it.
Yeah.
Do you know, were quite incredible. And I mean, in the translation, obviously it's lost, which is one of the themes of the show. Was our character Joe Boyle, who was called Jack Ettle, wants to learn Irish because he wants to find out, to hear it the way that Joe told it, or that Joseph told it, you know.
Yeah.
He wants, like, the beauty of it, and that. So he becomes familiar with the ghost. He imagines, like, he's living with the ghost of Joseph there, and they walk around the building, and the walls talk, you know, like there's the line about some people say, if only these walls could talk, I wish they'd shut the fuck up, you know. And so just things like that, just about the whole history of St. Connell's as well, because it's come from a time, all those asylums in Ireland were built at the same time. They were based on St. Connell's in particular was based on a British military barracks in India, do you know. So it was all stuff of the empire.
Yeah.
And people were put in for the innocuous reasons, and for political reasons, for, you know, like young men put in because they were inheriting land. So you put the boy in the hospital, and then the land goes to the uncle or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, things like young girls who were regarded as too beautiful, you know, and just lots of stuff, and obviously pregnancy, all kinds of things that people were put into. There was an epileptic ward as well, where people who had epilepsy were all kept in the one ward, and there was a huge farm there. It was also the biggest business in town, so there's a huge farm there. So there'd be all these people working there as well, and you'd hear stories. Like I was interviewing people, hearing stories about like when the circus would be in town, they'd take all the residents out to see the circus. So there'd be a whole procession of maybe 300 people down the main street in Letterkenny on the way to the circus.
Oh wow!
And lots of stories like that, and so I intertwined those stories from a local who worked there, and there was just stories of dances. There used to be local dances there, where lots of the town people would go up for the dances. And so it was a story about this guy, Joe Boyle, Jack Hettle, who's unseen. Do you know?
Yeah.
No one really appreciates is that what he needs to be doing is making punk music again. You know, and that's about his journey of coming to that place where somebody says, "Hey, do you know, we'll go downtown today. We'll buy an electric guitar today," and it's just like that. The power of that.
Yeah.
So.
And around this time, with Rural Electric and with the Mental, you were kind of collaborating with Laura Sheeran an awful lot.
Yeah.
And she seems to be fairly present through a lot of your work going forward.
Yeah. I started off, I knew Laura since she was a child. I knew her mother. Her mother was my best friend, and I grew to be my best friend. And so, as I say, I learned things from Laura when she was 4. She'd be playing the piano, and she'd hit a note in the piano, and it would be, all right, I like the sound of that. And then she'd go to the next, she liked the sound of those 2 notes together.
Yeah.
And the third note, no, I don't like that one, so I'll use that one instead. You know, and just that's what music is, the relationship between notes. And it's just what notes sound good together and what notes don't. You know, like in a very subjective way to it, kind of. And so when we were doing Rural Electric, Kevin Duffy wanted a break from touring. We'd done an awful lot in the few years.
He was another long time collaborator.
Yeah. Another brilliant musician, and really. So, I mean, he'd been there since 2000, I think. Yeah, Jack Hettle. He'd been in Jack Hettle, and the Derry Boat and that. So, 2000 and we'd done a Scottish 2003. So, 2005, Kevin wanted a break, and so Laura came on board, and she was only 17 at that stage, and she was just incredible, just an amazing creative person, and a great attitude to work as well.
Yeah, and she's kind of doing the whole like rock star kind of thing, or she's kind of a bit of a pop star and stuff, and everything mixed in between.
Yeah, she's like, she does everything as well. Like, and I mean, she just finished as assistant director with the Abbey.
Okay.
You know, so she's got all her like, and the thing about Laura as well is like she's self-taught in so many areas that musically and dance and film, you know, she does a lot of video stuff, but she's taught herself all these things and mastered them. And
you did Drone Bone Jetty with her as well.
Yeah.
She directed that, didn't she?
She directed that and filmed it. That was quite incredible because I was doing a residency. I wanted to do a play that I was writing called Drone Bone Jetty. It was called Loving initially. It was set in the future, about artificial intelligence and about this person Loving, and Loving's a performer, and it's about when the Academy of Hologrammatic Art in Galway, where the artificial intelligence. So at the start of it, they got all the actors and all the artists, all the top artists, and basically got all the info, drained them, observed them, got the music, just downloaded them basically, and then they discovered there was something missing, that an unpredictable quality. They had all the perfection, but what they needed was quirkiness and oddness. So then they give the work. They look for all the outsider artists, bad artists, the bad actors, do you know, the dodgy musicians.
Yeah.
So the worst of the worst. So they pick up these people. And there's a pair of twins, from Castle Troy, and their mother was a Velvet Underground fan. So as little girls, they weren't really twins; they were adopted, but they grew up together, and they started to get plastic surgery when they grew older to make them look like identical twins. Their mother used to bring them. She used to play Velvet Underground songs at funerals and weddings. So they'd be playing at funerals when the kids, they'd be playing the tambourine at a crematorium, singing Lou Reed's Waiting for the Man. So it's just all these weird characters, yeah. And they're working in being drained. They're in this the Academy of Hall Dramatic Art, and they're so frustrated by the work. They're well paid. They're the only artists in work, because now it's all holograms. It's like they've got holograms. It's Marlon Brando and it's not Lily Marlene. It's, anyway, Marlon Brando doing Playboy the Western World, and so there's no room for artists really. It's art without artists.
Yeah.
But these misfits, they're getting paid. They're working. So to entertain themselves, they open up a club called Heebie Jeebies up on the west side in Galway, and they have just far out stuff. They do really far out work. So we had the script. I'd written the script, and I'd done a lot of the soundtrack stuff because I found it helped me to write it. Did a lot of the soundtrack stuff, and we thought, okay, it's going to open up again at Christmas, and what happened was it closed down again. So we started rehearsing in isolation on Zoom, and then we decided we'd make it a hybrid, and then from a hybrid we decided, well, why make it half stage and half what? Why not have it cinematic as well?
Yeah.
So we went out to Rossmuck. We booked it, and it was still in lockdown. We had to get special permission, and we had a producer, Danny Gill, working with us as well, and a couple of other collaborators. We had Micah Halloran, who lives in Ennisdiamond now, who works in UCG, who's an amazing lighting designer as well, and so we created this movie that was, part of it was filmed on location, and part of it was filmed on the town hall stage during lockdown.
Okay.
And and that won a few awards and things. And it was. I mean, basically it's a story of this guy Puck Turtle who runs away from the academy. The rest of them meet a demise, and he makes a runaway kind of thing. And yeah, and the other part about the plot as well is Loving's father was a programmer, and he tells her not to worry, that they've implanted a trip switch kind of thing, so that one day all the artificial intelligence is going to flip, and it's not going to serve the masteters, the commodifiers. Yeah. It's going to serve love, so it ends up listening to this religious hope that it's really bad now, but one day it's all going to change and love will, just like my father told me. So it's a bit like Jesus kind of thing. Loving's a bit like Jesus kind of thing, because when she walks into a room or he does a show, people are immediately in love with her, because she embodies love. She's got a scarred face and a gammy leg from fighting in car crashes and things like that, but her whole being is just love. So there's a bit of kind of Jesus analogy there kind of thing.
It's fairly pertinent for what's going on in the world at the moment as well. Like,
it's mad. It's
AI really, art and everything.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to I think just putting it up on YouTube for free. We used to have limited showings of it, and it was in the Edinburgh Fringe. But we're thinking now it's just because it's coming up all the time.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Looking forward towards the future, do you think that live performance will become even more valuable, more vital because of all this bullshit with AI, where they can
I think so.
scan people's faces for extras, and they can get an algorithm to write a script and all this kind of stuff. Like
it's amazing what the AI can do.
It is, it's wild.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be some amount of want for, a human-made thing. I think there will be scripts made by AI at some point. There will be all this kind of stuff. There will always be a want for a human-made.
Yeah, I heard Hank Williams doing Straight Outta Compton.
Oh yeah, all that stuff going up.
It's like it's brilliant. It is brilliant, but at the same time, it's scary. And
Just today, I heard Johnny Cash doing Barbie Girl.
Isn't it? Wow.
And it sounds exactly like them. It's wild.
Fun because it was applying to do this tour, and what I was saying is that we used a Bowie quote as well. That Bowie in 2002 said music is going to become so on stream online. Like he's predicting then that it's just going to be everywhere, and for a unique experience, you better get used to touring, because that's going to be the only unique experience there is.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that lockdown gave us as well, was we had everything that we needed entertainment wise, streaming at our fingertips, all the information, all that, except we didn't have that communal experience of being together, of the event, and of the live, of the music actually happening right now in front of us, the 3-dimensional. So I think we're entering into a real good time for performance, because it's going to be valued, and it's like music's free, except now you performers going to be saying, well, yeah, that's free, you can have all that free, but we want paid for this.
Of course, yeah.
You'd expect at the very least for anything that you're putting in that much effort and time and whatever else into it, you need to be able to come up with something at the other side of it. And the most kind of recent stuff that you were doing, it was Nettle Horse and Zeitgeist Jukebox.
Yeah. So that the show Trombone Jetty was the second of, there'd been a show Radio Rosario, which was set in future Galway.
Yeah.
And then Nettle Horse was really kind of partly the third in that futuristic series, and we'd done that in Tulla last November, end of November, and Town Hall Theatre in Galway, set in the future, and then seems to tear in Tralee, and now we're hoping that will bring that touring. I think it's pretty definite now that we'll bring that touring in the new year.
Brilliant.
And that's set in the future as well, about this benevolent, kind of benevolent, a dodgy heiress, 103 years old, from Boston, who wants to come back to Ireland and wants to be cryonically preserved. Her doctors has told her that science hasn't caught up. She's going to have to be cryonically preserved, so she wants to bring her stuff with her in a pyramid. So she's going to build a pyramid. She's going to be in pyramid until they can bring her back, and in the west of Ireland. And so she thinks, well, what happens if she comes out the pyramid and people don't like her? So people start talking to the Vatican, and they figure, what would I have to do to become a saint?
Yeah.
So she starts doing benevolent stuff, and part of that is that she gives away 5 acres. These are her American lawyers. She's got land. She's Irish, Boston Irish. So she wants to give away 5 acres of land to poor people. Poor people who live in their cars. Yeah, and
5 acres.
They talk to this dodgy politician who's been blacklisted, or he's off been taken off the Law Society. And he says, oh yeah, I can do that. And she's, funny enough, he says, there's a national law now, that you can actually build a stable without planning permission, because it's part of the whole eco thing, the horses, bring back horses kind of thing. So there's an eco grant that you can get to build a stable, not a grant, but you don't need planning permission to build a stable. And he says, and locally we've amended that to say that, if you need someone to mind a horse, they can build an extension onto the stable. So technically you can build a wooden house without planning permission. You'd need a horse.
Yeah.
So the show is about this horse fair. That's these people that win the 5 acres in a lottery, and there's a horse fair where they'll all have to buy a horse, and then they'll get their 5 acres. So they're all moving from the east. It's like Grapes of Wrath, like Steinbeck. There's all these people with all their furniture, moving and living in cars, and they're all going to this place where they can build new homes and so it's about that. So that's Nettle Horse, and then Zeitgeist Jukebox is very much a live show where I've only done it once.
That was in Campbell's.
That was in Campbell's
yeah.
in Cloughanore. So it was experimental there. It was really exceptionally good. Turned out better than I could even hope, because what it is it's a collaboration with the audience where you make an album in an hour.
Wow.
I've been doing this thing for a long time.
What's that again?
You make an album in an hour.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I've done this thing for years where I compose a song with words from the audience.
Yeah.
And I, well, what happens if not just using the words, you know, like maybe one song like that, but what if you say to the audience, like, okay, we're going to make an album now together, and it's going to be the best album in the world. This is the best album ever, and we're here now. I think how significant that is. think that one day there's going to be tours walking through Campbell's and saying, "Oh yeah," and that's where that lady sat, who did that, you know, and they'll be talking about this album for generations, and making references to things like you'd say instead of the fire announcement, you'd say, you know, smoke in the water.
Yeah.
You know, the studio burning down. So you make all the references to classic albums and that, and then we gradually make an album together. And I have lots of extra instruments, so you can ask people you know that's a musician in the audience who didn't expect to be asked out. You can say, "Would you play bass, or would you play?" It's really interesting to ask them to play an instrument that they don't usually play.
Yeah, of course.
Or you can say, "Anyone in the audience like to play the mellotron?" And so I'm not in control of which way it goes.
Yeah.
And you end up, you're going towards 12 songs, and you can do the whole thing, the dramatization. You can the self-doubt can come in about song 10, you know, and musical differences and tensions, and all that kind of thing, you know, and as well as that, like the drugs becomes, you know, people get up to go to the toilet. What's happening in the toilets, you know, and the sex, and you know, like it's really become degenerate. He's just fucking risking the whole fucking album here is jeopardized because you know, like fucking coke and you're fucking all over you know, and you're just like that, and it's just really good fun, and it's
that's amazing.
Really amazing good fun. And then you get backing singers up, like the finale that we done in Cloughanore was just incredible. It was just. Yeah, with backing singers, and it was a full band playing, and yeah, mighty fun.
That's wild. That's so interesting.
Are you hoping to do that again?
I
hope you are.
I'm really looking forward to it, because as well as it's going to be different every time. I mean, obviously you'll develop some patterns, but you can go against those patterns as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, potentially it's just there. You know, when people get into it as well.
Yeah.
And let go, like it's. Yeah, it was incredibly good, and I'm not saying because there's other people. It's all the audience is involved, so the creativity of the audience is incredible, and because it's so fresh. But yeah, so we'll be doing that next summer.
Okay.
Again, and hopefully getting festivals. We're doing Nettle Horse. Hopefully we'll tour from January, and January, February will be Nettle Horse will tour, and then I've got another show, where myself and Finn Robinson, who's another long-time collaborator. I made an album with Finn as well, with a highly strung orchestra, and we've done a few shows together, and I love working with Finn as well. So we've composed a soundtrack to play live with the Buster Keaton film Sherlock Jr., which is next year. It'll be 100 years old.
Okay.
And we were commissioned to do that for the Regional Cultural Centre in Letterkenny, and it's just sublime. That the film is sublime. And usually when you see it, you can see it on YouTube for free. Usually when you see it, it's got piano music and clarinet, and it really goes into that jazzy feel, tries to go that. So we kind of got contemporary music with synthesizers and electric guitars and things, and it's just beautiful, because Buster Keaton's such a beautiful person to watch. Then the editing of the film is incredible. The gags, it's all just sublime. And then you take kids as a family show, so you bring in, like, we've been looking at it so much that we'd forgot about how's the audience going to react to this. We'd just been wanting to get the music so we could play it live and hit all the spots, you know.
Yeah.
And then the audience came in, and there's little kids there, and they're breaking up over gags that Buster Keaton done 100 years ago, and they're just delighted. And then there's grandparents, obviously, and older people who can identify with silent. Maybe they wouldn't have been around for silent movies, but they would have seen you know, they'd know who Buster Keaton was.
Yeah.
And then hipsters all of it. So it's a very interesting project as well. So we're doing that in the Town Hall Theatre in Galway on the 10th of September.
10th of September.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and then in Athenry, the Heritage Centre, the 17th of September.
Perfect.
That's great.
Well, John, Little John, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
very much.
Wonderful.
Thank you for your patience for listening to me rabbiting on like
Oh no, it was great.
I tell you, we could have done another hour and a half.
Oh, absolutely. That was fantastic.
My name is Richie.
I'm Lavin.
Check out the podcast at Shnug with a H, and check out Little John's Instagram and Facebook, and go to see the shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you both. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Richard.
No bother.